how did the Archaeological Legacy Institute get started, and how did you get involved in this project?
Well, I founded this organization back in October of 1999, believe it or not. So we've been around for more than 25 years. We're basically a media organization, although I'm an archaeologist and we're involved with research. We connect with archaeologists as well as filmmakers and other media people all around the world all the time. And we have a lot of different outlets, media outlets ourselves, including our website. We have a subscription video service called Heritage Broadcasting Service. We have a weekly podcast, a monthly cable TV show, annual film festival, and there's probably more that I just forgot to tell you, but we're very busy, including on this project. So now you would like to know how we got started with this project. It actually has a long history. It goes back to my association with Dr. Tom King, who was the archaeologist for Tiger, that is the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. They've been involved in research on Nikumaroro since 1989. Tom led many excavations at what's known as the Seven Site on the island there, which is the place where some bones were discovered in 1940. Those bones were subsequently taken to Fiji and analyzed by a doctor who produced a report. You may have read about that. That site, Tom has excavated numerous times, and in that process found many artifacts that are very fascinating and appear to relate to an American woman of the 1930s. So Tom is a longstanding colleague of mine as an archaeologist. I've worked with him in other contexts as well. And I've always been fascinated by the story anyway. So over the years, I've gotten more and more interested in the specifics of his work. And I was able to actually go with him to the island in 2017, which I did. And that was a wonderful event. And things that transpired since then have drawn me even further into the project, especially the discovery online of the Tria Object in 2020 by Michael Ashmore. So by the following year, 2021, we were very much involved in gathering more information about the Tria Object, which has led us to where we are today.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the discovery of the Tria Object? It's satellite photos. That's correct.
That's right. Well, Michael Ashmore is an Amelia Earhart aficionado, you might say. So he likes to follow what's happening. And he was looking at aerial imagery of Nikumaroro Lagoon in 2020 on Apple Maps. And he saw something. And so he pointed it out. He said, "What's that?" He told a lot of people about it. Initially, I wasn't terribly impressed. We frequently get messages from people saying, "Hey, look at this." And most of the time, they turn out to be nothing of consequence. But after examining it, by the next year, I was very much interested in looking at more. So that's how that came about. And we had an Amelia Earhart symposium right here in Eugene in 2021, connected with our film festival. And I invited him to come and make a presentation. So he did. Showed us some, pictures and talked about it. And very quickly after that, I was starting to look for more information. And we gathered more satellite images. And that led to further research. Actually, there've been years of research now behind this project, and we're planning to go to the island in November of this year.
I did kind of want to ask you about the timeline, because some of the images, the satellite images we've seen have been dated 2015. You just mentioned, the person that brought them up to you was looking at them in 2020. So it's kind of like the process of why it's taking so long to actually mount this expedition, and what about the images actually made you think, this is a viable lead that we should actually go after?
Right. Well, I can explain the timeline. Even though we now know that the object became visible in 2015, that doesn't mean anybody saw it. Pictures were taken by satellites, but they're not necessarily visible to people. We actually bought them, right? We spent good money. We spent $5,000 and some dollars gathering an additional 24 images. We purchased those, right, as a part of our research. And during that effort, we found out when it became visible. We had to sort through a number of satellite pictures before we figured that out. and nobody noticed it until 2020. We didn't start working on this until 2021. And it's very complex to organize an expedition, as you might imagine. It takes years. We did a lot of research before we got to the point where we are now. A lot of background research goes well beyond the satellite images. So all that takes time. So I certainly don't find it to be a long time because lots has happened, and we've moved forward on that as rapidly as we possibly could while still doing the proper job.
And, you mentioned artifacts have been found on this island previously. Now, what are circumstances are different now versus back in the late 1930s, 1940 that potentially allowed for the plane or the wreckage to actually be found?
Well, Tiger has been involved in research on the island since 1989, and they're the ones who have done most of the work gathering information. And you can go to their website to see more about that. It's voluminous. They've been to the island about a dozen times and gathered a lot of information, including artifacts. And we've detailed some of that in our own information page at archaeologychannel.org/Taraia, Taraia. So it probably would be best for you to look at that, but there are quite a number of artifacts of great interest. As I mentioned, artifacts from the Seven site that appear to come from an American woman in the 1930s, but also other artifacts, including, I mean, there are many things. We were there in 2017. We found a woman's shoe, a leather shoe of exactly the style that she liked to wear. That was her size. We found a flashlight dated to the mid-1930s. In 2015, people there who went to the island found a medicine vial, which had an inscription, a partially legible inscription that said UCA Pharmacy. And we know that she lived in Toluca Lake, California at that time, and the nearest pharmacy was the Toluca Pharmacy. Now, none of this stuff proves absolutely that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were on the island. But when you compile all that, and then I've only mentioned a partial list of the evidence. When you compile all that, it becomes a very, very compelling case that they ended up on Nikumaroro Island. But there's been no smoking gun evidence, meaning absolute proof, right? But if we can identify the Electra or the wreckage of the Electra aircraft on the island, maybe we'll have that smoking gun proof.
And I'd like to just double check my timeline with you about when exactly artifacts are found, because I may have gotten a couple dates mixed up. Was it the human remains that were found in 1940? I believe that's what I read in the Purdue press
Human
release.
remains were found in 1940, along with some artifacts that were also brought to Fiji at the time, including a woman's shoe and a man's shoe and some other things. You can find that list elsewhere, but that information wasn't really added to until much later, after Tiger got busy with their field work in 1989. So the modern research stems or begins at that point in time, and it continues up to the present day. And again, I have to say that the work of Tiger on the island is fundamental to what we're doing, and we're simply standing on their shoulders with work on the Tria Object.
You mentioned you visited this island before. What is it like? Is it a small island, a large one? Is it possible to live there?
Nikumaroro is in the South Pacific, only 4 degrees south of the equator. It's very, very tropical. It's about 4.5 miles long by about a mile wide. Most of it is a lagoon surrounded by a narrow strip of land. It's very, very beautiful. You have to be there to really appreciate it. It has tropical forest on it, lots of forest, including lots of coconut palms, which, by the way, were planted there. That's not a part of the natural vegetation. But it's a pristine island. It's uninhabited at present, although between 1938 and 1963, the British had a colony on the island made up of islanders from other parts of the Pacific.
And from the satellite images, are you able to tell potentially how far underwater this object that's been spotted might be?
Yes. Well, I can estimate based on the imagery. I'm estimating that it's below the water by about 2 to 5 meters. So it's very shallow. It is covered by a thin veneer of sediment at present, apparently, as we can see in the satellite imagery. So it's below water and below sediment, but very accessible. So you don't need scuba to go down there. You could free dive down to the object with no trouble at all. It's very, very close to land. It's very close to the nearby sand spit, which you might see in the images. Just a few meters. You could practically dive out on top of it from the land.
And if it does turn out to be the wreckage of the plane, what'll be the next steps after that confirmation?
Yes, our first visit is purely a reconnaissance mission to identify the object. Everything depends upon the outcome of that. If we're successful with the project and we identify it as the Electra, then our plan would be to go back the following year and carry out a full-scale archaeological excavation of the site. This is an archaeological project. I'm an archaeologist. We're an archaeological, organization, and this is fully compatible with, what archaeologists do. And our approach will be professional, and we'll uncover it, identify it, and make use of the information as efficiently as possible to learn more about what actually happened back in July of 1937. And then beyond that, you may want to know if it's feasible to recover the wreckage, we would be involved with that as well, to make it available for further research and for the public to see.
And you're doing this.
We're currently working with Purdue University in regard to that. They have a great interest in potentially obtaining access to the wreckage and to showing it to people there at Purdue.
And from what I've read, Purdue recruited Amelia back during her lifetime and actually helped her procure the plane. Is that correct?
I think that's fair. I'm not sure about the word recruited. They certainly spoke with her and she agreed to work with them. And so they have a long history with Amelia Earhart. They're very proud of that history. They have an airport. They were the first university with their own airport. They have places on campus named after Amelia Earhart. They have a statue of Amelia Earhart. And the story continues now with this project.
Now, there's been other expeditions in the past to explore things that have been spotted that possibly resembled what could be the wreckage of the plane. We hope potentially this is the time, but is there anything about this particular expedition that you feel is different from ones in the past?
Are you referring to previous expeditions to the island or other hypotheses about what happened to Amelia Earhart?
Other hypotheses in general.
Okay, well, I feel that the evidence that's been compiled for Nikumaroro as the final destination is overwhelming. After decades of research, the lines of evidence are many, including the radio bearing evidence, which yields lines crisscrossing that cross the Pacific and intersect on Nikumaroro Island. We have the Bevington object image, which appears to be the landing gear of the Electra still standing on the reef in October of 1937, just 3 months after the disappearance. Many lines of evidence, and when you add it all together, it is very, very compelling. As compared with other hypotheses, which have not nearly as much evidence to support them. Now, of course, that could be debated by others. I'm simply giving my opinion, but I would suggest that those who are interested to just compare the evidence for the different hypotheses, and the Nikumaroro hypothesis stands out from the others in that regard.
And what do you think it is about the mystery of Amelia's disappearance that has had such an enduring impact on our society?
When I was growing up, it was a big story. Even as a little kid, I knew all about Amelia Earhart. I mean, the world knew about Amelia Earhart. And when she was traveling around the world back in 1937, there was something like 1 billion people following her path. This was 1937. They didn't have TV even. They were following on radio and in the newspapers. She had already, you know, at least experienced at least 2 ticker tape parades in New York City for things that she had done. She was a hero. She's an American icon. So her disappearance was a shock. And the memory of that loss has persisted in our culture and around the world since that time. So I can't imagine a bigger mystery than this one. So our association with it gives us great excitement and also a feeling of great responsibility to get it right.
Well, those are all the questions I had. Is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered?
Well, you know, it's been a long path for us to get here. And then I should mention also that back in 2019, a lot of us were very depressed because at that time it looked like every effort to find the smoking gun evidence had failed. Robert Ballard went there with his Nautilus ship, you know, supported by National Geographic in 2019, looking in the deep water off the reef of Nikumaroro. And, you know, with all his technology and all his expertise, he was unable to find any trace of the aircraft. And by that time, and after all the research and efforts to find more bones, to try to do DNA analysis, which turned out not to be, possible, it seemed like we had reached a dead end. And many of us were disappointed, frustrated. And then in 2020, all of a sudden, Michael Ashmore says, "Hey, what's this?" And that started a whole new cycle of research. And so it gave many of us hope. And I think that hope is very much alive and maybe stronger than ever.
Just one more question I just thought of. You did mention earlier that, believe there's just kind of thin layer of sediment over the plain right now in fairly shallow water, and it's not a large island.
Correct.
So how did it stay hidden until now?
Well, the object is located on the lagoon just across from the passage leading out to the ocean. Every day when the tide rises, water flows into the lagoon and it carries sediment with it. And up against the opposite side of the lagoon, it settles. Right at the location of the object, it's a place where sediment tends to be deposited by that daily flow of water. And only occasionally is that deposit removed, and I think that it happened in March of 2015 when tropical cyclone Pam arrived, and a huge storm surge swept across the island and into the lagoon at such a velocity that rather than depositing sediment on the object, it swept it off. Similar to a shipwreck on the Oregon coast, for example, that typically covered by sand because of the daily wave action, but then occasionally a storm comes along and wipes the sand away and then covers it. It's a very similar situation here. So it's not a surprise that people didn't find it before the Tria object was identified. Not at all. In fact, I think people walking the beach prior to that time would not have had much clue that something like that could be there, because it was essentially, it had become part of the landform. And then in 2015, that cover was removed and it became visible. So we have the advantage of new information based on the satellite imagery that came after that time.